All right. Greetings, everybody. This is Nolan Smith with Pastrami Nation, the meet of pop culture. We have a very special interview today. So first, I'd like to interview our Pastrami Nation cast of characters. We have Ashley Hall,
Hi guys.
Shane Hall,
How's it going?
and via the vast internet, we have Kevin Hoskinson.
Hey guys.
And our special guest for today is the writer and creator of Spencer and Locke, an amazing comic book from Action Lab. Please welcome David Pepose.
Hi guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, thank you for taking the time on a Sunday, sir. I know weekends are precious in any place.
No, listen. Anytime I can talk about this book, I'm always happy to do it. So, no, thank you guys for taking the time and for all the support you guys have given us. It means a ton.
Oh, awesome. Well, we'll jump right into it, sir. I'll go ahead and start, and let me grab my questions. So, sir, what inspired you to create Spencer and Locke?
Well, I think a lot of it, some of it was just I kind of taking that step to making a comic of my own. I've worked in comic journalism for about 10 years. I interned at DC Comics before that, but I never really felt that idea that, like, oh, maybe I could write a comic of my own. It felt kind of not even like a forbidden thought, but just something that just seemed impossible. And it was around I guess it was the summer of 2016, maybe? No, 2014. I wasn't connecting with a lot of books that were coming out. And there was that voice in the back of my head that said, okay, maybe you should put your money where your mouth is. And I thought, people say, write about what you know. And I don't know about you guys, but I was like, I don't know anything about anything. The only thing I knew anything about, I thought, was comics. And at first that feels very limiting. But then I thought, oh, you could do something kind of metatextual about that. And that's not quite as limiting as you thought. And so I wanted to do something with a classic Frank Miller foundation. Later, but we realized that like real writers can do it. And I thought, what would be the weirdest thing you could throw against Frank Miller? And so I thought of a few ideas, but none of them were really clicking. They all felt very shock value for shock value's sake. Like you could do like a Muppet version of The Wire, and that'd be fun. Like,
True.
But it just none of it felt like it could sustain. And then I thought of Calvin and Hobbes, and that's where it all really clicked. And I said, oh, like not only is Frank Miller and Bill Watterson two like iconic, trailblazing, pioneering creators, so they feel like they fit together. The story kind of clicked in my head as soon as I thought about it. This idea of this hard-boiled cop who's still holding on to the stuffed animal. And it's like, oh, well, what's his home life like? He still needs a stuffed animal. He's still imagining his imaginary friend. Maybe it's not like charming affectation anymore, like you see as a kid. Maybe it's like a symptom of a deeper pathology. And that's sort of when like the gears started turning. I said, okay, there's more to this than just like a quick like nervous talk for a nap. There's an actual story about like mental illness and PTSD and trauma to it. So that was kind of the inspiration behind all of it. Once I had an idea that I felt really kind of strongly about, we were off to the races right after the past.
Oh, fantastic.
Cool.
That's awesome.
That's good.
So you had mentioned, of course, comic books being like, that's the one thing you knew, it's the one thing you were good at. So growing up, what were your favorite comic book series?
Oh man, well, of course, Spider-Man. Spider-Man's my all-time favorite character.
There we go.
I came of age just as the trade paperback market started to become a thing. So, the Death and Return of Superman, Kingdom Come, Nightfall.
Oh, nice.
Got in. I got in as a people with Spawn when they were doing the original trade paperbacks for Spawn. My parents, I was a fan of the Ninja Turtles cartoon, and they got me the first publishing color collectibles of the actual Easton and Laird Ninja Turtles. And that was like, it blew my mind a little bit, because I was like, whoa, this is way more violent than I thought I could. Things like Brian Augustine, Humberto Ramos' Crimson, Grant Morrison and Howard Porter on JLA.
Oh yeah.
They never collected it, but Devin Grayson and Roger Robinson on Batman Gotham Knights. I'm basically quoting a lot of stuff that's like mid '90s to early 2000s. Um, and every so often, I kind of fade away, and then I come back with something else. So like Civil War, 52, and Dark Reign, and then once I graduated college, I went to DC Comics, and kind of the industry kept me after that.
Fantastic, man. I think a few of us have read quite a bit of those books you mentioned.
Yeah.
The Morrison Porter and a JLA. Heck yeah. Heck yeah,
Yeah,
man.
that's
I love that. All right, let's see. So you told us a little bit about this part, but what popped you right in the world of creating comic books? What got you into that?
Well, so I always want to do something in the comics industry, and what's weird is that it took me a long time to realize that real people make these things. It's like an industry. People make a living doing this, so when I was in college, I kind of had this weird thought in my head where I was like, all right, what's your astronaut dream? Like, what's like the thing that anybody, no strings, if you could do one job, what would it be? And you're in college, go for it. See how it goes for you. And so I applied to Marvel and DC every single year of college. And my freshman year, nobody knew who I was. So nothing. My sophomore year, he'll never forgive me for this. I emailed DC, and I got a form letter back this time from a man named Ivan Cohen. And Ivan, unfortunately, forgot to remove his email signature from the bottom of the form letter. So I bothered him for 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
But he kind of asked for that,
I bothered him for years, and then Jan Jones, who ended up taking over the DC program, internship program, I bothered her for years. And finally, my senior year of college, I think they got so tired of me calling like every 2 weeks that they're like, okay, fine, we'll finally give you an internship. So, I worked as an editor, but this was 10 years ago. This was right as the recession was about to hit, and there were no jobs. There's no jobs whatsoever. And so I wound up working comics journalism for a long time over at Newsarama.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, Janelle Asselin, who's an assistant editor in the Batman office. That's where she got her start. And so I told her, I'm desperate. I don't know what to do. I want to stay in the industry, but I don't know how. And so that was the beginning of a long tenure at Newsarama. And it was good because you know enough to know that you don't know anything. I realized very quickly that what an editor entailed was not something that I'm necessarily built for. There's a lot of the scheduling, the project management, and you're not always picking the particular creative teams. That usually comes from a little bit of a higher price bracket than you, or a higher pay grade, I should say. And so for a while, it was a little bit adrift. I was doing the review scene, I was doing the comics journalism scene, I was going to conventions and meeting creators, but I just didn't really know what my future was going to hold. And I remember my father sat me down shortly before I started writing Spencer and Locke. I visited him. I think he knew that I was a little adrift in my career. I was working a corporate job that, it paid the bills, but I wasn't happy. And he said to me, David, what's the thing that only you can provide? What's the thing that only you can do? And I kind of thought about it for a while, and I said, well, I know a lot of people can write, but nobody can write the way that I write.
Well, that's true.
That kind of what got the gears turning a little bit, thinking, all right, maybe I have a shot at this. It didn't come easily, though. I stress that Spencer and Locke was my first published book. It was certainly not my first script. I wrote a short script a day, a few days. Just like a short comic script, 5 to 8 pages. It's not that long, I promise. And many of them were terrible. You'll never see them. Some of them I've cannibalized for better things, but you'll never see these terrible scripts. They're just in a folder of a computer. But it's kind of like doing your reps,
Right.
Like it's it's resistance training. And sort of once I got a little bit more confident in the structure and realizing, I didn't have to be so precious about it, and I could just kind of, you don't have to hold on to your ideas that tightly. You can just put them down on the page and realize you'll come up with more ideas. That was a very freeing thing. So yeah, then I kind of just dipped my toe in. I wrote this first script for Spencer and Locke. I wrote the first issue. I didn't really change anything from what you guys have in your hands now. It sort of, that first script felt really good, enough that I felt confident doing more of it, which was a first. And and then the rest of it felt like a dare. It was like, okay, maybe I'll write a plot for the rest of it. All right, maybe I'll find an artist to see how that feels. Maybe we'll shop this around. Like, this would be fun. And then Action Lab were the ones that reached out to us first and said, I think I emailed them after work one night, and Dave Blanche, our editor, emailed us back about 20 minutes later. And he said, how soon do you get this book done? And that's when, like, I kind of felt a chill go through my spine.
Yeah. Right. It's real.
I was like, I have to write this book. I feel like Jorge Santiago Jr., our artist, I feel like he was in a similar position because it took us a while to get the pitch ready. We went through a number of colorists, for example, before we were able to shoot people around. So it had been a few months, and I think he had thought, oh, well, it's probably not going to go anywhere. So I emailed him and I said, hey, I think we have a publishing deal. He was like, what? What? I was like, yeah, sorry, buddy, you're drawing this. So it was really just kind of like a dare to myself, and weirdly enough, it paid off.
Right.
Yeah.
I consider myself the luckiest writer in the business because I really kind of tripped backwards and fell into it.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic, yeah.
That's great. That's really cool to hear.
All right, Kevin, you're up.
Cool. So you've mentioned a couple of the names that influenced you specifically to write this book. Who are your biggest influences kind of overall to get, to write comics?
So, Frank Miller is, I consider a very big influence on me just because I like the way that he always experiments with the page layouts.
Oh, yeah.
That Will Eisner training. And so the way that he plays around with rhythm and the way he plays around with panel layouts, and sort of it's kind of this very proto version of the kind of decompression that we see these days.
Right.
Where he's sort of able to stretch a certain moment and really kind of play up the intensity. Jeff John, I'm a huge fan of his.
Of course.
He always seems to key in on the metaphor behind a character and sort of translates it into the emotional side of it, which I really like. He had a book, an issue of JSA. It's a very deep cut, but he had an issue with Liberty Bell that is like, I always have it on my phone, I always have it on my tablet because it's sort of like a mission statement for me, where it was about Jessie Quick and her relationship with her father and kind of her tarnished relationship with her mother, and her realizing that was the metaphor behind the Liberty Bell, is that just because something has a crack in it doesn't mean you have to throw it away.
Right.
Right.
I think about that a lot, that issue. Devin Grayson with Batman Gotham Knights, I really love the way that she really plumbs a nice psychological depth from her characters, which I think makes them very heartbreaking and very poignant, but I think very endearing and engaging to follow. For this book in particular, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa with Afterlife with Archie.
Okay.
That shortly before I went into Warren Ellis and Declan Shalvey of Moon Knight. I love the way that they pace that book. I'm not a huge fan of decompression. I feel like comics are expensive, and so if you want to do it on an issue-to-issue basis, you want to make sure that every chapter is what Heidi McDonald calls a satisfying chunk. So I like books like Cameron Stewart and Brendan Fletcher and Bad Cars Batgirl. That's another one that has like really excellent pacing, I think. Grant Morrison, huge fan of his. I could never write the way that he writes, but I like how ambitious and sort of grand scale he is in things.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure I'll think of some others after. But I try to read a lot of people, and then I try to kind of, they say good artists borrow, great artists steal. I try to anything I see from somebody else's toolbox that I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'll usually rip my brow, make a note of it, I'll kind of file that away, because most of the time people don't catch the things that I catch, and so I'm like, oh, well, let's file that in the old brain for later.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, you can definitely tell just by reading the book too. Those influences really come through really well. Yeah, love it. Yeah, it's great. How long? So with Spencer and Locke, how long did it take from the kind of inception of it? I mean, I know you said that you kind of talked about it a little bit earlier.
It took. Okay, so it was very quick to write it. It took me less than a week to write the first script.
Wow.
And it took. I think it took me about a week and a half to write the first script. It was called The Treatment for the rest of the series. And for anyone who doesn't know what treatment is, it's the book report version of your plot. Sort of, you break it down issue by issue. Which treatments are usually the hardest thing for me. That's sort of where I iron out all of the plot points and making sure everything makes sense. So the fact that it went so quickly, I was like, okay, I'm onto something here. It took us though. It took us the better part of a year to get the pitch out and approved. It took us, Jorge was our first member of the team, besides our letterer, Colin Bell, who I had been friends with before. And it took us about 4 or 5 months just to get the art done. Jorge was working a day job, and it was also, it wasn't a high priority project at the time. We had no time or deadline. And it took us a while to get a good colorist. Jason Smith I see him as our secret weapon, but he was our third colorist actually that we spoke with for the book. We had worked with one colorist she was very nice. It just her style wasn't the right fit for Jorge's art. And then we worked with another colorist who I will not say their name, but I don't know what happened with them, but they took the money and vanished.
Oh no!
And Jason was kind of like a Hail Mary. I'm friends with Facebook friends with a lot of comics creators. And I was kind of so sick of not having a colorist at this point that I posted online. I just said, "Hey, we're looking for a colorist. Does anybody know anyone?" And Taylor Esposito, letterer Taylor Esposito, actually was the first one to reach out and said, "Hey, have you met my friend Jason?" And when we saw Jason's colors come in, that was when okay, I knew this book. At this point, I was like, if we don't sell this book, I'm going to self-publish it. Just like out of
Right, yeah.
Fantastic.
And it took us a little while. We shopped it around to a lot of places, and it actually took us a little while. Even when Action Lab approved the book, we wanted to go back and forth just as far as making sure our contract made sense and put it down correctly. So it was, I think, around Christmas of the following year after I'd written it, we officially named the contract and got started. So, and even then, that took 10 months, I think, for us to finish the rest of the book. We signed Christmas of 2015, and we finished it Halloween of 2016.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Wow. No, that's awesome. Well, sorry, my thing went off there for a second. So just one more question. What kind of advice would you give someone who's trying to pursue a career in the comic industry?
Man, okay. I hope you guys have some time because I have a lot of. I think about stuff a lot. I'm a big fan of process stuff, so I always think about breaking stuff down. The first bit of advice is just do it. Get it done, get it made. That's always the best thing you can do here. But I think starting small, I think is really important. I read a bunch of short scripts, and none of them were ready to see the light of day. But I felt like I learned something, and I built on that foundation to get to be what I felt was ready for prime time.
Yeah.
There's something that Joss Whedon likes to say: dessert first. So if you take a longer script, you don't have to write order. Write the scenes that you like, the ones that come to mind to you, the ones that you're really passionate about. You really distill the rest of your project, because then you can kind of write it all out of order, and then you can sort of connect the picture.
Yeah.
Momentum begets momentum. Beyond that, just it's tough. It's a marathon, and make sure that your concept is simple enough that you can explain it to. I call it the grandma rule. Can you explain this to your grandma in a way that she gets it?
That's a good way to put it.
Right.
If you can't, it's too complicated.
Yeah.
But start kind of small and just hunker down and just get it done.
Right.
Comics, I say it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I've worked in high pressure jobs, and this is definitely the hardest one. But it's the most satisfying. It's the job that feels the most like me. The thing that I can sort of put my own voice into and sort of say the things that can stick. So, you should do it. Anybody that's curious, they want to do it, do it. They take a lot longer than you expect, so you might as well just get started. Just keep doing it. That's my advice.
That's awesome. That's some great advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, next up we got Shane. Go for it, Shane.
So this is a question I was pretty interested in myself for
Yeah.
whatever reason. But besides Blue Panther, was there any other characters you kind of toyed around with before you chose Blue Panther?
Well, so I wanted to do something that evoked Hobbes and Calvin Hobbes, but in a way that didn't get me sued. I thought originally, I thought about a bear, but there was a series called Stuff of Legend that had a stuffed animal bear as its lead, and I thought that might be a little too close to home. And I like that idea of sort of that feline ferocity, that you had with Hobbes and that you would share with the Panther, that I don't think you necessarily dog or something like that. And I like the idea of having the character be blue because I was acutely aware that black cat exists, and I was trying very hard to be like, okay, what can we do to signify things that are a little different from black cat? Button eye, for example, giving him sort of this bright blue color, and with Spencer's coloration and as well as Locke. We played around with a lot of different colors just to see what would pop off the page the most. And that blue was a very early choice that we made since we locked red hair, where no matter how far away you are, you know exactly who you're looking at, even from a distance, just from that little bit of color. So it was a little bit of a visual shorthand for us, of being able to pull back and sometimes fit more panels on a page, just because we had that little bit of extra wiggle room with the color.
That's awesome. I thought it was an excellent character and choice color, so cool. So the next one is what can fans expect with the new series of Spencer and Locke?
Yeah, well, so Spencer and Locke 2 is in previews right now. Our first 2 issues are actually up on previews, and I said if our original series was What If Calvin and Hobbes Grew Up in Sin City, our sequel, we're taking the Fables approach, and no comic strip is taken. We're doing hard-boiled Calvin and Hobbes versus hardcore Beetle Bailey for our sequel. Roach Riley is our new villain. He's our analog Walker Beetle Bailey. I think he's like a little bit of Heath Ledger's Joker, a little bit of Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver, a little bit of the Deer Hunter. He's kind of Locke's dark mirror opposite. He's the sole survivor of his platoon overseas, and he saw some stuff over there that really kind of has warped his perspective on things. I like to think that he's sustained just as much pain and suffering as Spencer and Locke have, but over a much more accelerated time frame. And so as a result, he's come back with a very kind of nihilistic philosophy on things, where he sees a very unique virtue in pain and suffering. And so that's particularly bad for Spencer and Locke, who are in a bad place in and of themselves. We're going to find that they're under suspension after the events of our first series. because you don't leave a body count like that without somebody calling you to account for it. And Ward, Locke, his custody over his young daughter Hero is in peril because of the investigation. And moreover, he's kind of facing an existential crisis. Without spoiling too much of our first series, he faced a lot of his childhood tormentors, and he's finding out in the sequel he doesn't feel any better about it. You don't really find catharsis at the end of a film, despite what a lot of Hollywood action movies will tell you. And so that's starting to kind of hurtle over into his partnership with Spencer. They found themselves at a crossroads, and they're kind of at the worst possible place to be when Roach blows into town. And so, I see Spencer and Locke I see them as, despite coming from a very traumatizing and harrowing background, I see them as characters that come from a place of hope. Locke's invention of his best friend is sort of a promise to himself or a goal of maybe someday I'll be able to leave these scars behind. Maybe I won't be defined by them for the rest of my life. And Roach kind of rebels. He wears his scars like a badge of honor. And so it's not so much, it's just as much a physical conflict as it is a war of ideas. And that, it's very unstoppable force meeting the immovable object. This is our big thing. This is our Empire Strikes Back. And I don't provoke that with me, I promise. We're just trying to get bigger and better and more emotional. And, Beetle Bailey's the tip of the iceberg. We've got all sorts of little cameos in there.
Oh, great.
We've got, riffs on High and Lois, on Jeffree Star. We just showed a preview of the this weekend, where we've got our riffs on Hacker the Horrible and Marmaduke and the Family Circus.
Oh, Marmaduke.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That's kind of the beauty of a high concept like this is, all these characters lived on the same page when I was reading the comic section of the newspaper as a kid.
Yeah.
So why would they live in the same universe?
Good point.
And being able to take all these different archetypes and sort of fill them in for whatever role you needed, that was like a really fun and kind of freeing way to approach these people. And I think it allows us to evolve our high concept while still paying tribute to the spirit of the first. Because, mind you, there's a lot of other books in the stands right now. And so you have to evolve a lot,
That's great.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I can speak for all of us, so we're definitely looking forward to what's coming.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. All right. So how has the reception been for Spencer and Locke from fans and the comic book community?
Wow. It's been amazing. This was my first published book, and I think if I had written a list of everything that I could have possibly hoped for out of this, I still would have been adding more stuff to the list. Because, not only was the fan reception amazing, and not only was our critical reception overwhelming, but we were nominated for Comic Ringo Awards for the first volume.
Oh, how cool.
Awesome.
That's great.
And the best part was, not only were we, nominated for like kind of the cool sexy categories, best movie, best writer, but every member of the core creative team was nominated.
That's great.
That our fans are very vocal and very loyal, and that they recognize that this was not a one those were two main teams. That all four members of our team, the real variant artists, Mon House and Joe Morby, they all added something to the mix, and they all kind of their work really elevated and fed upon one another. So it's been incredible. The thing is, of course, you'll have some outliers. There have been a handful of people who the premise isn't for them, and that's fine. But the thing I kind of like the most about this book is we're playing with some very combustible material, and the fact that people see, even the people who were really skeptical at first, everyone who gave us a fair shade liked it. And I think that just goes to show that, it shows just how talented the team I'm working with is, and the fact that we approach this concept, which could be kind of like this edgelord fantasy in its own hand, we treated it with empathy and respect and care. We never wanted to romanticize abuse or make it titillating or sexy or funny. That part we really wanted to play straight. And I think a lot of fans, we've had fans come, meet us at cons, also survived abusive households, and they felt how much the book is meant for that. And I think as a writer, I take back for any praise higher than that. It kind of makes us feel like this book it isn't disposable. It lets us kind of give something back to readers, and that's something that I think kind of makes this book
Awesome.
Great.
And then last but not least, we just want to let everyone know, where can readers follow or find more news for what's coming up for Spencer and Locke?
Yeah. So the book has its own Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram account. It's just Spencer and Locke, one word spelled out. The ampersand is spelled out as an and. You can also, you can go to Action Lab's website at actionlabcomics.com. And then you can follow me on Twitter. It's Pepose D. It's just my last name and first initial. And please, any fans who like the book, tweet us. We love talking with readers. Anybody who's watching this now who hasn't heard about it, call your local comic shop. Pre-orders. I always say make or break books like ours. You can still get the first trade paperback. You can tell your store. The code is June 171107. Our first issue of the second arc, the codes are Feb 191309, Feb 191310, and Feb 191311. You can get issue 2 as well. The codes are Mar 191329, Mar 191330, and Mar 191331. There you go. I say these every night before I go to bed. But books like those really they make or break indies like ours. It shows stores that there's a demand for us. It shows our publisher that there's a demand for us. The thing is, I really want to do a volume 3, and we've got the plan. Just like Roach has always been a part of the plan, we have plans for this series moving forward, as long as the demand is there. So, tell your local comic shop, buy them as gifts for your friends, your family, your enemies, whatever you want.
Everyone.
But we appreciate everyone's support. We appreciate your support. And, I feel like we're the little indie that could. And because of people like you have been our backbone. So thank you for everything you've done for us already.
Well, thank you for getting this out for everyone to read.
Yeah, we really appreciate this awesome piece of work.
Thank you.
Now, David, going forward for this year, any conventions you have planned that you're showing up at that people can find you at?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be at C2E2 in Chicago later this month. I'll be doing Denver Con. I'll be doing Heroes Con for the first time this year.
Gotcha.
I just got accepted to MegaCon Orlando. I'll do Baltimore, San Diego, and New York. There might be a few others that pop up later in the year. That's the definitive schedule right now.
Nice.
But I always try to add in more cons to anybody who will have us. And I always like to travel and meet new readers who haven't heard of us before. So, but yes, the next time I'll be at Chicago, and who knows? I may even have some more stuff available then. We'll see.
Man. How awesome!
It's great to hear.
Well, thank you once again, David. Of course, if anybody is a fan of Spencer and Locke, just like David said, you need to talk to your comic shop and tell them you need this trade, you need issues 1 and 2. He gave you the codes. You have no reason not to do this. Most comic shops, you can do it off of Comics Hub, which is an app. You can put everything on your phone. If you're in the high desert, I suggest you do it through Line Breakers, which is where we're at right now. So please make sure you support the indies, because without the support, the indies cannot continue. So once again, thank you, David, for taking the time to speak with us. And we really look forward to what you have to bring with Volume 2. And we're going to say Volume 3, Volume 4. We're just going to keep going down the line.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you.
Well, you have a good night, sir.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye.
No, I have to stop the recording.